Welcome to a New Year's Chicago Crossing Model Railroad layout update. Today brought to you by the Indiana Harbor Belt. I decided to pull out a bunch of my IHB locomotives, and so I'm running those on the layout today. There's even one of the old Atlas 4000 series GP 38s. Always cool to occasionally find one of those. Anyway, lots happening on the layout, all of it minor scenicking and details and things like that. One major accomplishment is getting this Chicago building here. You can see it in the center with the set of windows and the white doors. Getting that fully assembled. Last time it had a rubber band around it. This time it has glass in the windows, and it also is complete. This building is actually a kit bash, so just the facade was 3D printed. Everything else is one of those Walthers apartment building kits where you see just the rear of the apartment. That actually gives me the opportunity to put in a little Chicago style porch in the back. The building next to it also has been glassed in for the windows. With these 3D printed facades, by the way, these were ordered from Shapeways. I had somebody on Shapeways who actually makes a bunch of scale models take the images that I sent from Pilsen in the neighborhood and put them into design, and then I purchased them through that. Make sure everything is high quality plastic. I ordered their best possible plastic for that. The building right here with the 3 windows on the second floor, I've had that with an applique just of some kind of fencing or something like that I had spare. That's actually exactly how the building looks currently based on Google Maps. And likewise, I basically just painted these buildings to look exactly as they do currently. Aside from that, other major accomplishment is getting the fencing all completed at the refinery. It is complete in the sense that it's been assembled. It's not been fixed down or anything like that, specifically because of the fact that I need to paint it. Fencing like this, it looks a little bit artificial. These are gold metal model fences. What I'm going to do is airbrush all of that fencing black. Obviously I'll pull it up first and just put it on some styrofoam, and then follow up with a sort of blue-gray color to represent the type of steel that these fences are typically made of. I think it's just a galvanized steel or something like that. That will create a little bit of artificial shadow. I saw that trick on Boomer dioramas. The other thing I'll probably do is, much like Boomer did, I'll make some crepe paper tarps, especially to go over in the front here. This industry probably wants its privacy, so I figure they'll put up some tarps. They may not maintain them very well, but they'll put them up. This siding also has gates. Makes sense if you have a hazardous material and you don't want kids getting in or something like that. The gates are open. A recent delivery of a couple of tank cars just occurred, as you can see. The other thing is I only fenced in the concrete area, and I decided with this second track on the siding I would actually just leave that open. That provides a little bit more opportunity to use it as a generic parking space for cars, and that can include tank cars. There's a lot of areas, especially in the suburbs of McCook and stuff like that, where you'll just find either long leads into tank car tracks or the like, where somebody will just park the cars. So I'll try to replicate that as best as I can. In this way, it also just provides an opportunity during switching to have somewhere to stick spare cars. I think it adds a little bit of flexibility. Down below that track, you can see another addition from recent work on the layout, these little bin blocks. So bin blocks are basically large interlacing concrete blocks that normally are used to make bins in, like aggregate places and stuff like that. You can actually see over here stacked bin blocks. They came this way. I forget the manufacturer of these. They're basically just injection molded resin. They come unpainted, kind of just a tan color. and then you can go and paint them up. They come in different configurations, like these little stacks. I've got a few over by the abandoned factory. You can see sort of blurred in the distance that just form a barrier there. These do very much the same thing on an individual basis. They're just forming a barrier between the road and the track. And these were hand painted. Again, they come a tan color. They usually require a little bit of sanding. The injection molding is not perfect, especially for these individual blocks. But basically what I did is I painted them kind of a combined set of colors. I used Vallejo paints for this. And then I sponge painted them yellow. But since these have been here a while, what I wanted to make sure I did was to make it look like the paint had been chipping and had been weathered over time. And so the yellow paint was sponge painted on. It makes sure that just on these front faces, it doesn't look like the paint is completely covering. For these end ones where there's a turn, I also used a paint pen to just add some zebra stripes. And then took that same concrete mix of color and sponge painted over that to simulate the chipping and wearing over time. Likewise, you can see water stains, and even over here, some rust stains. That's oil paint, and that was because these all have a little metal hook for being able to be placed using a front loader or something like that. You can find these all around the Chicago area. They're used as de facto fencing and things like that. The other thing about placing these kind of post hoc on the layout is I went around each block and took essentially a mix of cinders and dirt from my backyard to match the original kind of landscaping that you see here. Because these blocks have been here a while, you want to make sure that they look as if they're heavy and that they're sitting in the ground. And I think, if you just put them on there, you'll see gaps that normally wouldn't exist in reality. So that's a way to make sure that these have the illusion of being large concrete blocks rather than something just kind of stuck to the ground. And that's a strategy I use here as well on all of this rail that's sitting on the side. You can kind of get the impression that it's bent down under its own weight. It's being supported on both sides by little boards. And so that bending helps create the illusion that the track is heavy. And again, coming back with some dirt and things like that to pack underneath it helps to show that it's been there for a little while. Aside from the bin blocks, this is another area where I'm working on landscaping. You can see, by the way, where that bright green is. That is unpainted static grass. So all the static grass, and actually most of the turf here, is airbrushed in order to get variegation in color and to be more realistic. That bright green is not something I think really tends to exist in the Chicago area. If you look at a lot of photos, and just from my own experience having lived there, what you tend to see is either a darker green or, again, something, especially in the industrial areas, a lot of dead grass or variations in its viability. Same deal over here. That's a lot of airbrushing using both buff and earth at a very, very, very dilute level, like 1 to 10 with 90% isopropanol. So altogether, what that gives is, kind of a nice impression of some deep vegetation there, as well as some bushes. I'll probably follow that up all the way through here, and I might make that more of a gully, as if there's a depression in the soil, and so there's more vegetation there. In fact, probably what I'll do is scrape up some of this terrain, faux paint it, and then put down some gloss Mod Podge to resemble a river, and maybe I'll throw some cattails in there. Not really a river, maybe just more of a low spot where water collects. And I've got some potential junk over there, just some plastruct piping and some 3D printed boxes and things like that. That might go there. Probably in this river, I'll make sure to throw in like a newspaper machine that was dumped there. I remember going out to Hegewich once and going over to some little swampy area that was right on the border of Indiana and Chicago. And there was like a Sun Times machine thrown into the lake. So, layouts are on some level based on what you see in life. So I think I'll probably replicate that just for a little story and a little humor in that diorama section. So the other area that I've been doing a little bit of work here and there is back over in the granary / brewery area. And these couple of employees and the piping that they're working on over there are all new. That pipe is a combination of an elbow that I scrounged from a Refinery kit from Walthers, as well as spare 3D printed piping that I have, as well as that little wheel there. So that was all just glued together and then set down. That'll provide a way for tank cars to be unloaded in this area. The two employees, those are some fairly inexpensive model power figures. And those things, once you put them on the layout, especially model power, it's kind of a lower trim of detail. They tend to look a little artificial. So I take these characters and I wash them over with India ink, diluted in isopropanol. It helps to just kind of create a little more blending and shadow with them, and that makes them look a little bit more realistic, as if they're out in the sun, or at least, you know, have some wrinkles in the clothing and things like that. So that just helps with realism. The other area I've been busy is on the grain elevator itself. You can see the main tower where the elevator would be is missing. That's because it's undergoing the same treatment that you see on the concrete over here, which is a detailing, chipping, and painting. This grain elevator has gone through a few different processes of weathering and detailing. When I first built it a few years back, I just painted it white like you see on the box. In Chicago, almost no grain elevator is white, and very few of them are ever maintained by continuing to paint them white because they're just giant blocks of concrete. So what happens is the concrete weathers, ages, gets stained, etc. So here I tried to replicate that. What I did for this entire building is basically paint the whole thing a dark umber color first, and that was over the original white paint that I made, simply to create the opportunity for shadows, which you can kind of see accentuated in between the different cylinders here. Following that, I just use custom concrete colors, usually mixes of buff, deck tan, and things like that. And again, all with an airbrush over it, trying to mostly get the paint on the fronts and less into the cracks and crevices here. So you don't want full coverage, and I think that's really kind of the key. Because then when you come back, you can start to detail with sponges as well as with washes, all using Vallejo paints, in order to create some of the variegation you see in the concrete, including some of these lines and things like that. And then lastly, I came at it with oil paints to create some of the streaking effects that you see all along the area. When that's all done, except for some of the streaks, I come back with a sponge, and that's a mix of white acrylic and kind of a blue-gray from Vallejo. And what that does is create the appearance of remnants of white paint. And so you get this really nice variegated appearance like a lot of grain elevators have. I probably spent, you know, close to 6 months studying grain elevators to see if I could figure out how to replicate it. I don't think it's perfect, but at least it gives the impression. And then lastly, with the loading shed over here, that's also starting to undergo weathering. I may actually repaint that entirely, since it was originally just painted in aluminum color. Most of the time, I don't think these are really aluminum in color. I've looked at a lot of different sheds and they tend to be painted. So I'll probably start there and then go back and re-weather. Anyway, that is the update for Chicago Crossing layout for the new year. So that's basically what I was able to do over the holiday time, and hopefully some new stuff to share with you coming up.